The WNBA is having the kind of moment most leagues spend decades chasing. And it's happening so fast that one wrong decision could wipe it out before anyone even realizes what they lost. Because behind the highlight clips, the sold-out crowds, and the women's basketball is finally here celebration, there's a quieter story unfolding. One that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. A countdown. A negotiation. And a risk the league has never faced in a moment this big. And that's why Caitlin Clark's message hit so hard. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't shade. It was a warning, delivered by the one person who can't afford for this momentum to stall. A year ago, a lot of people still talked about the WNBA like it was building. Like it was almost there. Like the breakthrough was always right around the corner. Then the breakthrough actually happened. Not in a cute way. Not in a slow, steady way. In a wait, is this real? Way. Crowds got louder. Cameras showed up earlier. Games started feeling like events. Not just for the diehards. Casual fans too. People who didn't know rosters were suddenly arguing about matchups. People who never watched a full game were suddenly watching full quarters. Then full halves. Then full games. And the league's business side moved like it finally understood what was happening. A new long-term media rights package landed, one of those deals that signals, yeah, this isn't a side project anymore. The kind of money and commitment that says the WNBA isn't asking for attention now. It's demanding it. Then came the expansion wave, and this is where it got even louder. The old numbers got left behind. Teams weren't being valued like, maybe one day. They started being valued like right now. Expansion fees jumped from what used to sound big to what now sounds almost unreal. That's not just growth. That's a market screaming, get in before it's too late. And here's the part people don't like saying out loud. This surge wasn't just random. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a trend that magically happened on its own. It had a face. Because when one player can pull national attention, change road attendance, spike viewership interest, and turn regular season games into must-watch nights, that's not normal. That's an engine. And when your entire moment is being powered by an engine, you don't casually risk shutting it off. That's why this next part matters more than any three-pointer clip going viral. Because while fans were busy celebrating the boom, the league was approaching a deadline that could decide whether this era continues at full speed or gets paused at the worst possible time. While fans were locked in on highlights and headlines, something else was quietly taking shape behind closed doors. Not dramatic on the surface. No breaking news banners. Just meetings, deadlines, and a ticking clock that doesn't care how much momentum the league has. This is the part most people don't see. Collective bargaining talks don't feel urgent until suddenly they are. Until a calendar date stops being a suggestion and starts becoming a threat. And for the WNBA, that date isn't abstract. It's real. And it's close enough that everyone involved knows there's no room for performative posturing anymore. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Timing matters more than fairness in moments like this. Not because fairness doesn't matter, but because momentum doesn't wait for perfect conditions. The league and the players both have legitimate positions. Players want better travel conditions, more transparent revenue sharing, and compensation that actually reflects the value being generated right now. None of that is unreasonable. In fact, most of it is overdue. But here's where the tension creeps in. The WNBA isn't the NBA. It doesn't have decades of financial padding. It doesn't have a fan base so deeply entrenched that it can disappear for a year and come back like nothing happened. It doesn't have the luxury of saying, "We'll figure it out later." A work stoppage here wouldn't just pause games. It would pause attention. And attention, especially in women's sports, is fragile. Hard-earned. Easy to lose. People forget this, but growth doesn't freeze cleanly. It decays. Sponsors move on. Casual fans drift. Media narratives shift to something shinier. And when you try to restart the engine, you realize it's not sitting where you left it. That's why this moment feels different than past negotiations. This isn't happening during a rebuilding phase. It's happening at the exact moment the league finally broke through the ceiling everyone said existed. And the players know it too. That's why so many of them started speaking publicly, something you rarely see unless the stakes are serious. When athletes stop keeping things behind closed doors, it's not for leverage alone. It's because silence suddenly feels more dangerous than honesty. The pressure isn't just on the league office. It's on everyone involved. Because if this momentum gets interrupted now, history suggests it won't simply resume where it left off. And that's what made Caitlin Clark's words land the way they did, because she wasn't talking like someone trying to win a negotiation. She was talking like someone who understands how rare this moment actually is. When Caitlin Clark speaks, people don't hear it as noise. They hear it as context. And that matters, because she's not positioned like most players in this conversation. She isn't a retired legend reflecting from the outside. She isn't a veteran negotiating the final chapter of her career. And she's not a role player whose livelihood depends entirely on the outcome of a single deal. She's the center of gravity right now. Everything the league is celebrating, sellouts, record viewership, road crowds that suddenly feel like home games, those things follow her. Not because she asked them to. Not because the league manufactured it. They just happened. And everyone inside the sport knows it. That's why her comments didn't feel like an attack. They felt like a reality check. She didn't dismiss what players deserve. She didn't minimize the demands. She simply pointed out the part nobody wants to say out loud. If there's no basketball on the floor, the entire structure collapses. Fans don't show up for negotiations. They show up for games. They fall in love with moments, not memos. What made her statement even more powerful was the way she framed it. No dramatics. No ultimatums. Just acknowledgement that compromise isn't weakness when the alternative is losing the moment entirely. That kind of clarity doesn't come from ego. It comes from understanding leverage and responsibility. Because whether people like it or not, Caitlin Clark isn't just representing herself anymore. She's representing an entry point for millions of new fans. Fans who didn't grow up watching the WNBA. Fans who don't have loyalty built over decades. Fans who are here now, but could just as easily leave if the product disappears. And that's the part that shifts the conversation. A veteran can afford to wait. A league at the peak of its breakthrough cannot. Clark understands that attention is a currency, and it depreciates faster than any contract dispute can be resolved. You don't get to pause a cultural moment and come back expecting the same energy. That's not how audiences work. And maybe that's why her message resonated so deeply. Not just with fans, but with players too. Because deep down, everyone knows how rare this alignment is. Talent, visibility, timing, all landing at once. Moments like this don't repeat on command. And while the league was weighing its next move, something else was happening online. Something that almost distracted everyone from what was actually at stake. While the real tension was building off the court, the internet did what it always does. It grabbed onto a clip and decided that was the story. A sidestep 3. A clean look. A defender just a half step late. Within hours, the narrative wrote itself. Screenshots. Slow-motion breakdowns. Headlines framed like proof. Proof of dominance. Proof of hierarchy. Proof that someone had won something that never actually existed in the first place. Paige Buecher's hitting a shot over Caitlin Clark should have been celebrated for what it was, elite basketball. Two players operating at the highest level, reading space, reacting instinctively, executing with confidence. Instead, it got packaged as a moment of exposure. And that's where the disconnect showed up. Because fans who actually watched the game didn't see embarrassment. They saw chemistry. They saw competition without bitterness. They saw exactly what women's basketball has been missing for years. Moments that feel natural, not manufactured. There was no trash talk tour. No forced rivalry. No social media back and forth. Just basketball. And ironically, that's what made the clip travel so far. The problem wasn't the play. The problem was how quickly it became a distraction. Suddenly, conversations shifted. People debated who owned the moment. Who looked better? Who would dominate next season? And all of that noise pulled attention away from the far more important reality. This kind of basketball only exists if the league keeps moving forward. These clips are the product. Not the debate around them. Not the hot takes. The actual plays. And that's what gets lost when momentum is taken for granted. People start arguing over crumbs instead of protecting the table. The irony is that the viral moment did reveal something important, just not what the headline suggested. It showed how hungry fans are, how badly they want real competition, real stakes, real continuity, no drama required. Which is why the next wave of clips hit even harder. Because after months away, Caitlin Clark wasn't just part of a debate anymore. She was back on the court. And the difference was immediate. It didn't take long for people to notice. No announcement needed. No dramatic countdown. Just a few clips from the gym, a few possessions strung together, and suddenly the conversation changed tone. Not hype. Not speculation. Relief. Caitlin Clark looked comfortable. That's the detail that mattered most. Not the makes. Not the range. The comfort. The way she moved without hesitation. The way her footwork looked clean. The way the ball left her hands without that split-second pause players sometimes carry after time away. For the first time in months, fans weren't imagining what the next season might look like. They were watching it breathe. There had been whispers before this. People zooming in on photos, debating whether she'd gained too much muscle, whether her body had changed in ways that explained nagging issues from the previous season. It all lived in that strange space where concern turns into overanalysis. But once she was back on the court, most of that noise faded. Because players don't lie with their movement. You can't fake ease. You can't fake rhythm. And you definitely can't fake joy. She looked like someone who wanted to be there. Someone who felt good being there. That's what fans responded to. Not just Clark fans either. WNBA fans. Basketball fans. People who had been waiting through the quiet stretch of the off-season, refreshing timelines, hoping for something real. And when those clips hit, you could feel it, the collective exhale. This is why continuity matters. Moments like this don't live in isolation. They stack. One clip leads to another. One game leads to a habit. And habits turn casual viewers into invested ones. That's how leagues grow without forcing it. And honestly, if you're someone who enjoys breaking down these moments, the stuff that actually shapes where the league is headed, it's probably why you're here in the first place. A lot of people watching right now don't just want highlights. They want context. They want to understand what's happening behind the moments. And that's exactly what this channel is about. Because what those clips really reminded everyone of is how much there is to lose. This wasn't just a player returning to form. It was a glimpse of a season that hasn't happened yet. A reminder of what's waiting on the other side of all these negotiations, if the league gets there. And that's the uncomfortable part. Because once fans see the product again, once they remember how good it feels to watch this level of basketball, the idea of it suddenly disappearing doesn't feel theoretical anymore. Here's the part nobody wants to imagine, but everyone needs to understand. If the season doesn't happen on time, or worse, doesn't happen at all, the damage won't show up immediately. There won't be one dramatic headline announcing the end of momentum. It'll happen quietly, gradually, almost politely. First, the clips stop coming. No game winners. No debates. No viral breakdowns pulling new fans in at random hours of the night. And without clips, the algorithm doesn't wait around. It moves on. Always does. Then the casual fans drift. The ones who discovered the league last season don't feel like they're leaving. They just stop checking. Stop looking. Stop caring in the same way. And when the league eventually returns, those fans aren't sitting there ready to come back. They've already built new habits. That's how momentum actually dies. Not with outrage, but with silence. This is especially dangerous for women's sports, where history hasn't exactly been forgiving. Attention has always been conditional. Media coverage has always been fragile. One lost window can undo years of progress, not because the product isn't good, but because consistency disappears. Sponsors notice that. Networks notice that. And once they recalibrate expectations, they don't rush to restore them. That's the part people miss when they say, they'll just pick up where they left off. No league ever does. And here's the imbalance that makes this moment even riskier. The consequences aren't shared equally. Players lose prime earning years. Fans lose trust. The league loses leverage it may never get back. Everyone gives something up, but the league gives up its future. That doesn't mean players are wrong for demanding better. It means timing turns reasonable demands into high-risk moves. Because what's being negotiated isn't just money or travel. It's belief. The belief that this league is stable. That it's reliable. That it's here to stay. And once that belief cracks, rebuilding it is far harder than growing it the first time. Which is why Caitlin Clark's message felt less like commentary and more like urgency. She wasn't speaking as a negotiator. She was speaking as someone who understands how thin the margin really is. This moment isn't about choosing sides. It's about protecting the window while it's open. This is what makes the current moment in the WNBA so delicate. For the first time, everything lined up at once. The talent, the visibility, the timing. The audience was already in the room, already paying attention, already invested enough to argue, debate, and care. That doesn't happen by accident, and it definitely doesn't happen often. Caitlin Clark didn't create this moment by herself, but she made it impossible to ignore. And when someone in that position pauses the celebration to say, "We can't risk losing this," it's worth listening. Because leagues don't collapse overnight. They lose momentum one decision at a time. One delay. One missed season. One assumption that fans will always be waiting when you come back. They won't. The WNBA is finally being treated like a major league because it's finally operating like one on the court. The danger now isn't criticism or debate. It's interruption. Stopping the very thing that made people care in the first place. That's why this isn't just a negotiation story. It's a timing story. A responsibility story. A reminder that growth is fragile, even when it feels unstoppable. And the hope is that everyone involved understands that. That compromise isn't surrender. That protecting the product protects everyone. Players, fans, and the future of the league itself. Because this era of women's basketball deserves to be remembered for what happened on the court, not for the season that never happened. If you care about where this league is headed, this is one of those moments where your voice actually matters. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe the WNBA can protect this momentum, or is the risk being underestimated? And if you want more breakdowns like this that go deeper than the headlines, make sure you like the video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.